the input we received from all the organizers of the NCP party and other extremist elements is that they were going for another vandalism and destruction of a nationally important landmark, which is the mausoleum of Bangabandhu in Tungipara. And they have literally declared that it is an open challenge to the people of Gopalganj, where they said it was to liberate Gopalganj. Liberate from whom? Liberate from where? Liberate from Bangladesh, turn it into a part of Pakistan. Mujibad has nothing to do with Bakshal as such. Bakshal was a temporary measure as planned by the then leadership. It wasn't just Awami League that advocated for it. It was basically a Singapore-style experiment where there would be one platform, like basically a national party.
National unity government, sort of.
They say that secularism is a major problem in the constitution. Why? Because they claim that secularism promotes Islamophobia.
So you mean to say that it is the secularism which is the bone of contention between...
So they're actually confused. They want to just bring in buzzwords. So they said that they want to use the word inclusivism. I don't know what political philosophy is that is. I mean, we assume, those of us who study politics or society, we assume that secularism is what inclusivity means, right? So now they call it, they're now saying that we should have the word inclusivity. I don't know what kind of inclusivity. These are just catchwords, buzzwords, in order to create maximum amount of confusion amongst a very confused young urban generation. This catchword of Mujibism. I mean, have we, in our 15 years of running the country, used the word Mujibad once? They are go into the ideological debate like it used to happen in the 80s, as you've seen in the western side of Bengal, in West Bengal, the Naxalite movement and etc., the ideological confrontations that had happened with many spectrum of society. That didn't exist in Bangladesh to the extent that it did in the surrounding area. Because of the religiosity of the people, religion was an easier card to play with.
Watching some clips from Dhaka where people are saying Tumike, Amike, and then saying Jongi, Jongi. Okay, so the word terrorist has become a word, it cannot be an issue
to
of
celebrate.
Mockery. This is a very serious issue. Particularly for a country which was in FATF grey list till 2014.
Yes. Right?
And where holy artisan, and even we are hearing now from the top police officers in Dhaka that holy artisan was a farce.
Yes, was a farce. That's what they're claiming now.
Looking back, don't you think that you could have handled it better?
For sure. You see, as the sitting government, if we give a popular issue to the forces that opposed us, we need to be mindful of the fact that that would be used against us, utilized to oust us. And that strategic thinking was definitely missing. Every government is blamed for every consequence of a state. So, and we were blamed, naturally. If you ask me now, there are so many points of failures in decision making that I had personally seen. It has then all of those failures then culminated into the chaos that had happened on the 5th of August. So it wasn't just a personal decision making process of the decision maker, the top decision maker, the prime minister, as now they are claiming, that certain decision making stakeholders agitated the government to take the decisions which had led to the outcome that it did. In terms of crisis management, were we very competent? I feel that we weren't. And therefore we suffered the way that we did. There was a huge stream of propaganda and publicity against us in the run up to the movement and during the movement, and they were far more resourced than we were. Of course, it's our shortcoming. I'm not trying to be defensive here, but we have to understand that, in terms of our public relation delivery as to what the general public was to make sense of from what we said was probably not as well thought out. But then again, at the very beginning, we were savvy enough to understand that this was a public sentiment. This was, it was a popular demand. So our own people, our own activists were actually aligned with them. But things got out of control when violence erupted. And when in any war, in any violence, truth is the first victim. Scenario planning that this could also come from somewhere, a third element. And perhaps those who were meant to do this scenario plannings did not do it intentionally or were possible active participants.
Hi, I am Pratim Ranjan Bose, and you are watching Podcast with Pratim, presented by Iravati Research and Communication Center, or IRCC. I have with me a special guest, Mohibul Hasan Chowdhury, better known as Nowfel. He is, or he was, the Education Minister of the ousted Sheikh Hasina-led Awami League government in Dhaka. Welcome to the show, Mr. Chowdhury.
Welcome.
This is you are the first one from Awami League whom I invited in this podcast over the last 1 year. It was quite, I should say it was a decided move, because I thought that others should get the opportunity first. And there were a lot of things, a lot of literature on Awami League and what are the problems, these, that. So in today's podcast, I will ask you some of the uncomfortable questions. I hope you wouldn't mind that. But before that, let me start with your quick reaction to the recent violence in Gopalganj. Bangladesh government squarely blamed your party for resorting to violence and preventing lawful assembly of the National Citizen Party. How do you look at it? Over to you.
Thank you for inviting me in your podcast. So your first question is not question, but you wanted to hear my reaction regarding the incident that has happened in Gopalganj. You have to understand the event that this King's Party, the National Citizens Party, has called for, and the event was called March to Gopalganj. Prior to that, whatever the political processions that they were holding across the country in different districts were not called march or any kind of with any kind of violent connotation. So only with regards to Gopalganj, they have called for some kind of a war cry. The reason being,
it was resonating to the march to Dhaka on August 5.
Also, the demolishing of the house of our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, on Road 32 in Dhanmondi of Dhaka. So they called for a mass agitation, brought in violent extremist elements in front of the house which embodied and symbolized our struggle for freedom. Whether you like the person or not, the house itself was an embodiment of our struggle for freedom. And it was actually a government property. It was donated to the government of Bangladesh, and it was turned into a museum. That is where our father of the nation was killed, along with her whole family. So And of course, his main mausoleum, where he's laid to rest, is in Gopalganj, Tungipara. And there is a small mausoleum there. So the input we received from all the organizers of the NCP party and other extremist elements is that they were going for another vandalism and destruction of a nationally important landmark, which is the mausoleum of Bangabandhu in Tungipara. And they have literally declared that it is an open challenge to the people of Gopalganj, where they said it was to liberate Gopalganj. Liberate from whom? Liberate from where? Liberate from Bangladesh, turn it into a part of Pakistan. I mean, this has really resonated very badly with the people of Gopalganj, who, irrespective of the party allegiance, they all had resisted on the social media and also in public. That even I have heard BNP leaders from Gopalganj saying, we do not want any chaos and vandalism in Gopalganj. There is no need for such war cry. There is no need for such destruction in Gopalganj, because we have, although it is a heavily Awami League supported area or district, they have been doing their politics in that area for many years without any violent consequence or violent incident. So even they themselves did not want to take part in this so-called event. And the NCP party brought in some activists which didn't look like activists. They brought in some followers of another party called the Islamic Shasan Tantra Party, led by the Peer of Chormonai, and some activists from that party were brought in all the way from Barisal, which is another district. And they have brought in some goons with them. And we have video and recorded evidence of the people they brought along with them.
Yes, I also saw some, the local web channels. So they were interviewing people.
Because of that declaration, people were not happy in Gopalganj. That people of Gopalganj take pride over the fact that Bangabandhu is laid to rest in Gopalganj. People from across the country come and pay their respect in Bangabandhu's grave. So it had really hit hard their sentiment.
Mr. Nowfel, so why are they? They say they attack Mujibad, quote unquote, or the ideals of Mujibur Rahman. And for that, they point at Bakshal, which was a kind of Soviet or China style experiment. I understand. So forming one party, involving all parties, etc., merging all parties. So back in 1975, it was, for those who are not aware, it was barely in practice, because before it could really start, or it had just started when Mujibur Rahman was killed. So, but anyway, why do you think, I'm an admirer of Mujib as a liberation hero. But I'm not an admirer for me.
See,
not an admirer of Mujibur Rahman as an administrator. Now all this can go. So why are they after Mujib's ideals? Can you just tell me briefly?
Mujibad has nothing to do with Bakshal as such. Bakshal was a temporary measure as planned by the then leadership. It wasn't just Awami League that advocated for it. It was basically a Singapore-style experiment where there would be one platform, like basically a national party.
National unity government, sort of.
National unity government, because the situation at that time was extremely chaotic. People were being killed, slaughtered, Awami Leaguers, including ministers in the government and others. And the Razakars were all out there. The situation was very grave. And an amendment was brought in the constitution, which was to take effect from December 1975. The law was passed on February 1975. The law was passed. And then It was to go through a whole process of implementation. And now, before it was even implemented, the disinformation campaign at that time was that Bangladesh has become a one-party state. It didn't. It only started. So whether the one-party state was going to work, or the platform was going to work or not, we didn't know whether it was going to work. But the campaign against it was that it would turn it into a communist regime or something like that. So, and with that pretext, he was killed on the 15th of August of 1975. Now, they class Bakshal as part of Mujibism, quote unquote. What is Mujibism? Mujibism, they think, is basically the ideals of our constitution. Not that they think, but they actually claim that it was Mujib and his cohorts' political philosophy which was then incorporated in our constitution. So socialism, as understood by us, in a sense that fair opportunity for everyone, not communism. Secularism, which is what they had the most problem with, they still have the problem with. And then democracy, parliamentary type or presidential, whichever type that the people would choose. And Bengali nationalism, which they thought was not indigenous, in the sense that Bengali nationalism incorporates a pan Bengalism, which has elements of Bengali history, culture, literature, also from West Bengal and the surrounding areas. So Bengali nationalism is also something that they had problem with. They still have problem with. They call it Bangladeshiism, Bangladeshi nationalism, right? So what they are now claiming is that what we have in our constitution is reflection of this quote unquote Mujibism, and they say that secularism is a major problem in the constitution. Why? Because they claim that secularism promotes Islamophobia. Now, you are in a country where 91% people are actually Muslim. So how can you ever claim that there is Islamophobia in Bangladesh? So if anything, there would be, the members of the minority communities would be more concerned and anxious about the overwhelming majority, right? So, but then this is the narrative that they had been running for many years on social media platforms, and every time extremist religious scholars were apprehended by the law enforcement, they called it as a purge on Islamists, right? Islamic parties had existed in Bangladesh from its inception time and until today, but those who provoke violence or values which are contrary to the values that the constitution is meant to uphold, meaning equality of men and women, equal opportunities for all religious and ethnic communities, etc., they don't like it because they want to bring in their version of Islam into the constitution.
So you mean to say that it is the secularism which is the bone of contention between?
So they're actually confused. They want to just bring in buzzwords. So they said that they want to use the word inclusivism. I don't know what political philosophy is that is. I mean, we assume, those of us who study politics or society, we assume that secularism is what inclusivity means, right? So it includes all the religious views. Now they're now saying that we should have the word inclusivity. I don't know what kind of inclusivity. These are just catchwords, buzzwords, in order to create maximum amount of confusion amongst a very confused young urban generation. And young urban the generation is understandably confused because of their age, because of their exposure to the global value system, and there is a lot of identity crisis. Are they Muslim? Are they Bengali? Are they Bangladeshi? And then they suddenly find that, oh, let us all attack this catchword of Mujibism. I mean, have we, in our 15 years of running the country, used the word Mujibad once? We didn't. We didn't have to, because what our party believed in, it was already accepted, including the BNP and many of the Islamist parties as well. So ideology was not an issue. But of course, they want to play with emotion of the people. They say that the word secularism hurts the sentiment of the majority Muslim people of the country, which is a total and utter lie. These people are only concerned about their economic welfare, their social welfare. They don't go into the ideological debate like it used to happen in the 80s, as you've seen in the western side of Bengal, in West Bengal, the Naxalite movement and etc., the ideological confrontations that had happened with many spectrum of society. That didn't exist in Bangladesh to the extent that it did in the surrounding area, because of the religiosity of the people. Religion was an easier card to play with, and they had succeeded it, and they succeeded in doing so. And that's why they want to call. Yes.
Yes, it is very unfortunate, but the identity crisis is clearly a result of the partition. Pakistan suffered from it. We have seen that. They tried to
continues to suffer from it.
They tried to distinguish from Indian culture and history, which is very foolish. Anyone
shared heritage. They want to detach themselves from the
political. We have a different political map, but the history and the heritage anthropology should be same. You cannot just claim overnight that we are different. Anyway,
it was a politics of division. You see, divisive politics.
Anyway, so let us come back to the present day, and you are right. I don't know what does it mean, but yesterday I was watching some clips from Dhaka where people are saying Tumike, Amike, and then saying Jongi, Jongi. Okay, so the word terrorist has become a word. It cannot be an issue
to
of
celebrate.
Mockery. This is a very serious issue.
Very serious.
Particularly for a country which was in FATF grey list till 2014.
Yes. Right?
And where holy artisan, and even we are hearing now from the top police officers in Dhaka that holy artisan was a farce.
Yes, was a farce. That's what they're claiming now.
Right. Mr. Nowfel, let me take you back to August 5. And today, over the last 1 year, what are the major changes in, Awami League is out of Bangladesh politics, and
not necessarily. I disagree with that statement, but I'll give my clarification a bit later.
Okay, so how is the scenario today? I mean, to me, it has tilted, and this I have noticed with every kind of regime change or uprising or whatever you call, those episodes. Bangladesh politics had essentially shifted towards the right. If we take a left and center, so then Awami League was perhaps just at the center or the right, just right of the center somewhere. Then BNP farther right to the center. Then Islamic parties at the right. Now, what we are seeing is if Awami League is out, left is inconsequential. They don't get votes, very minimal.
No, so they have
essentially what happened, NCP has positioned itself their closest ideological ally. If we see their actions, etc., is Jamaat. So they are somewhere between BNP and Jamaat. And as I said, that Awami League is out, so does it essentially tilted the whole balance towards the right?
So, ideologically speaking, there are two parts to this right and left spectrum. One is the economic policy-wise, the manner in which economy was being ran over the 15 years. It is a global phenomenon. Market liberalism, free market capitalism, is the essential economic ideology across the world, including China, which of course claims itself as being a communist country. So Awami League economically had to take decisions which one would consider classically right-wing economic decisions. But when it came to politically sensitive issues such as religiosity and religion having a monitored and regulated space in public life, and not totally let out to be played by whoever wants to play with it, they took a liberal stand in a sense that promotion of certain corrosive or violent or aggressive propositions by the scholars, I mean, not the scholars, but the religion-based political parties. Awami League, of course, excluded itself from it. But in that space where in the democratic in the political space, BNP and Jamaat had always aligned themselves together against Awami League in every political discourse. Now,
that is a contentious claim because Awami League has also shared the platform with Jamaat once.
That was in 1996 to bring about the system of caretaker government during the time of BNP regime. It was a joint protest, not an electoral alliance. Electoral alliance Awami League never had with Jamaat. That it never had.
But you had Islamic parties in your alliance?
We never had any Islamic party in our alliance. Okay. Never. We never had any electoral alliance with any Islamic party. But we respect the fact that in a democracy, you would have Islamic parties and you have to allow, you cannot disband them. The reason why Jamaat-e-Islami was banned was not because they're a religious party. It was because of their role in 2013-14 violence. It was because of their role prior to that. It was because of their...
You are saying the ban that you imposed right before your ouster.
Correct. But before even the administrative...
That's again very funny that if you were in power for more than 15 years and you imposed a ban on them, which was demanded way back in 1972. In fact, there was a ban in those days, which was revoked later.
Yeah, but it was revoked by the General Zia.
So, and you also imposed it through an executive decision. Your ban was
prior to that, there was a litigation pending in the High Court. So the High Court actually issued this ruling that Jamaat should be banned. It was during the time of the War Crimes Tribunal trial. So that's when Jamaat was temporarily suspended through the judicial authorities. Administratively, we did not do anything because the matter was pending for a long time.
All those things have today come back on you. You are banned.
Awami League was banned many times.
You tried Jamaat leader in absentia in ICT.
Not necessarily. We have also tried them in person.
You tried them in person, but at least one person. The other day, I saw one reference that someone was tried in absentia and he was delivered a...
Chowdhury Moinuddin, who is a British citizen and he is living in the United Kingdom.
Right.
He was the man who was tried in absentia.
But ideally, and war crimes trial, there shouldn't be a trial in absentia. But I thought that, I didn't know that it was done in the past as well. So that is a very important issue. Now, I would like to take you to the next part. You are the education minister. You are young when compared to you and couple of others who are young when compared to the rest of the ministry, which was probably mostly about 60, right? But this whole quota protest, which was going on since June 5th or 6th. June 5th was the High Court verdict, and then it was going on. Even in July, if we see, it was a very innocent thing. There was barely much to comment on it. It snowballed into such a big thing. And when I was going through the details, that it was from your side, from around July 7th or 8th, that the government started taking getting a little harsh on the protesters in their remarks. Not exactly harsh, but kind of criticizing them. So, and then we all know what happened. Your government wanted to enter into a political dialogue with the protesters, but by that time, lot many people have died, and there was a log jam. You were locked. Looking back, don't you think that you could have handled it better?
For sure. You see, as the sitting government, if we give a popular issue to the forces that opposed us, we need to be mindful of the fact that that would be used against us, utilized to oust us. And that strategic thinking was definitely missing. So this kind of law and order or strategic public security issues are usually dealt by the public security establishment, like the Ministry of Home, etc. And there should have been more monitoring of what was going on from the very beginning. Later, more towards the end of our government's tenure, near the 5th of August, we discovered that there were extra additional 7 lakh people inside the capital city. We discovered that many were brought in as combatants to fight the law enforcement forces. We discovered that there were many.
How do you calculate 7 lakh outsiders?
With the SIM, the number of mobile SIMs which were used in Dhaka city on the month of July, compared it with the number of SIMs used around the same time in 2023. So if you look at the users, then we found that there's a disproportionate amount of user within the Dhaka city, around 7 lakh. That's what we have found out. There's clear data on that. So these issues, these movements, these shifts of people should be monitored by our security establishment a lot earlier and more carefully, which we, of course, either failed to do it or we did it, but there was no follow-up on it. Second point I wanted to raise here was that Bangladesh is blessed with a huge young demography, and young people want livelihood. They want to sustain a good livelihood post their education. Over the last 15 years, the amount of investment that had gone into higher education sector resulted in a huge population of graduates who are looking for jobs. And the most lucrative and the most secure job that there is, of course, a government job, whether it is a position of a cleaner or a cadre service officer, government civil service officer. So given that that was the feeling of the young people of the country, we should have made some political gestures as well as some administrative declarations that irrespective of the decision of the High Court, we will pass a law which would which will ensure quota for just the backward and the disadvantaged people.
That was exactly the demand of the students, if I remember correctly.
Correct. So they had
wanted
used
10%
a very
quota.
They had used a
56%.
They had used a very popular demand, and the plan was to use that to agitate maximum number of people to be out there in public protesting, and then thereafter the bloodbath that ensued following the protest. So this issue could have been resolved at the very beginning, right? And probably what was being planned at that time as part of their claimed meticulous design to oust the government could have been delayed a lot later, and perhaps wouldn't have had the impact that it had at that time. And they designed it for a time when the Prime Minister was going to be out of the country, between some dates in the month of July.
8th to 10th or around that. And
She returned.
first she
back
came
on
to
the
India, and then after 2 weeks she went to China.
Correct. And then she was meant to go to Spain and Brazil.
Right.
And if we calculate the timing of flights to Spain and Brazil, that was the time when this was supposed to be sparked, and then a Sri Lanka style taking over of the parliament and etc. As it happened, as you've seen in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, which whatever they called it in Colombo. So it was a bit of a plan like that. Now, my opponent, my political opponent, or whether you call it anti-state elements or whatever, obviously they're going to plan something, right? It is our job in the government to manage that, to stop them from misusing the sentiment against the government to bring about a complete chaos and anarchy and collapse, right? So of course we failed in that. If we had intervened earlier, if we had taken proactive measures earlier, from security point of view, as well as the policy point of view, in that we could have quelled the protest at the very beginning. So of course, mistakes were made. I'm not saying that the mistakes weren't made, but the consequences, as it happens, every government is blamed for every consequence of a state. So and we were blamed naturally. If you ask me now, there are so many points of failures in decision making that I had personally seen. It has then all of those failures then culminated into the chaos that had happened on the 5th of August. So it wasn't just a personal decision-making process of the decision maker, the top decision maker, the prime minister, as now they're claiming. It was, I would say, an administrative inertia was there. Inertia meaning whether it was part of the conspiracy or whether it was incompetency, that is something that I am not able to answer right now. It could be part of the conspiracy that certain decision-making stakeholders agitated the government to take the decisions which had led to the outcome that it did. So there are two considerations here. In Bangladesh, we've seen always from 1975 till today, many foreign elements are usually at play whenever you have such large scale chaos and regime change movement. We've seen it even with this current government, our government, as in the Awami League government. We've seen it in 2014, 13. We've seen it several times, but perhaps this time our proactive management of the situation when it was emerging in its very early stage led to the situation being out of control and snowballing into what it did. But at the same time, some commentators also argue that there were other factors meaning not just instigators, not just agent provocateur, but certain immediate policy failures, such as sensitizing the public on certain issues, inflation, this, that. So this is what is also being discussed amongst many. And also micro corruption issues in terms of rights-based services, harassment by the establishment meaning the permanent government, the police and the civil service, etc., not getting the rights that they are entitled to, not getting the services that they are entitled to. So those things had probably contributed, but of course every government in every country has these basic challenges. You cannot make the entire population of a country happy. In terms of crisis management, were we very competent? I feel that we weren't. And therefore we suffered the way that we did.
Some would
whether
say
whether that incompetency was out of a conspiracy or whether that was part of our general inertia and incompetency, that is something that I can't comment on, because of course I haven't gone that deep into the decision-making process of institutions.
Well, it's understandable. You cannot comment on certain areas of the government as you were a part of the government. But to us outsiders, it seemed almost like you almost created it, a problem out of nowhere. And probably I should say that a little more caution in words, using words, would have mattered. Sometimes you gifted the opposition, whosoever it may be, a good alibi also. So,
You see, this is where I just want to say something, that Bangladesh's politics is not known for refined words and politically, politically savvy, statements.
nuances.
I mean, the nuances, exactly. So it is quite confrontational. It is very rhetorical. It's very dogmatic. It's not just from my own party, but then when you are in government, sometimes you have to really think of the consequence of every word. And I mean, I myself have made mistakes, which I then later realized that perhaps my not just with this incident, but whilst I was a position holder in my party, and then I realized that no, I mean, perhaps words should have been far more carefully crafted and delivered. So and unfortunately, the reality of it is that the culture and the handling of politics in general in Bangladesh is not so evolved, if you like, because practice of democracy itself is very flawed in our system for many different reasons. When you have outright extremist elements representing a large section of society in any given polity, then savvy politics becomes a very difficult task. You see, muscle becomes more important than policy. Power becomes more important than policies. So, I mean, to put it crudely, socially and politically, refinement was largely missing in the overall political culture of the country anyway.
Did you alert the government that the quota protest was supported by the Awami League people of Awami League supporters or their children? Did you?
Yes, indeed. It was conveyed. It was conveyed not just by me, but by very many stakeholders, decision makers. So, but then with so much information, the decision that came out of such, synthesizing of the information was not something that we were able to do. I mean, we were not privy to many decisions that were taken eventually, but I think there were too much time taken in taking the right decisions.
Yeah,
and
that is also correct, because we had seen, you are taking a decision.
Eventually, we took all the decisions that they were demanding, but meanwhile, a lot has happened. Because of our failure to take the right decisions in the right times, and also, you see, there were also an issue with the court. Now, we were letting many things to be decided by the court, but in any democracy, Parliament has the ultimate say to overrule anything that the court would give as verdict. I mean, although our constitution says that, I mean, that legal fight should not have been left out whilst the political fight was being lost out. So I think political intervention and
but you were not, insofar as the government is concerned, it was not very clear. If we look at the communication of the government, well, in India, we see many such cases where the government has drafted a bill and the court has upturned it, or whatever, something has happened, or some sudden out of the blue moon, something, some court judgment somewhere sometimes comes up, which is quite disturbing or disrupting. So
Right.
the government in their political communication addresses the issue that where they should head. But I must say, I'm sorry to say that your communication did not elicit any kind of hope that you are going to address the anxieties of the students. It was not there. I'm sorry. But
Yeah,
second thing,
yeah. Here, I just want to add a little bit. I don't disagree with what you've just said. Um, there was a huge stream of propaganda and publicity against us in the run up to the movement and during the movement, and they were far more resourced than we were. Of course, it's our shortcoming. I'm not trying to be defensive here, but we have to understand that, in terms of our public relation delivery as to what the general public was to make sense of from what we said, was probably not as well thought out. And because, as I said, the culture of such delivery doesn't exist, and discourse with other political elements should have also taken place. I mean, there are so many political parties which eventually joined the movement, and in fact, the majority of the protesters, I mean, now we see that came from certain political parties, and perhaps if the issue was resolved a lot earlier, they wouldn't have had the chance to join in the way they did.
no, but then were you, Awami League, doing politics at all? You are blamed in Bangladesh for destroying the politics.
That is a criticism.
Say, for example, your Jatiyo party, which is very close to you, had alliances. They said at the beginning that government should resolve it. Even BNP asked to resolve it. But you are not into, were you doing politics in Bangladesh? Probably not.
So, I think on this particular issue, we were being
when I say politics, I'm
puritanical.
of course talking in wider sense.
Yeah. So that's what I would say. We were being puritanical. It was almost as if we considered it as a make or break issue for us, ideologically speaking, that the successors of the third generation of the freedom fighters should get a quota or not. So that puritanism, I say, puritanism on this Muktijuddha issue has divided the generation a lot more. And I think that is something that we should have paid far more attention to, because even within our rank and file, we don't have all the Muktijoddhas and their children demanding quotas, right? So, my father was a Muktijoddha, valiant freedom fighter who organized movement in 1971, but he never even took his certificate because he thought it would be insulting for his effort to liberate the country. So there are so many, right? Problem is that once the regime was forcefully ousted, the elements that had now taken over, I mean, perhaps we should also contemplate and also realize that in the collapse that has happened post Fifth and the chaos
let us not
perhaps
get
also
into,
we've contributed into it. That's the contemplation. That's what our contemplation should go towards. That that soul searching, if you like, the word to be used.
I think you gave a pretty right answer here that Puritanism had taken over. I should say that you failed to see through
political flexibility, the reality, political reality. Yes.
Not only political reality, you failed to see through that the quota has become a cartel. It was a source of corruption.
Not necessarily. I won't say that. The quota had its benefits, because like the thing that is most celebrated about our government was that empowerment of women, ensuring that a huge number of female gender is incorporated in the public service system. So actually it had its benefits. The problem is communicating it to the aggrieved sector of the society was probably not done properly. I mean, sometimes the usage of the words, I mean, not just during this incident, but even prior to that, we weren't probably that savvy. and because you see, when you
No, I'm
don't
not saying this about the rest of the quota, but that 30% quota for families of freedom fighters was a basic source
third
of problem.
generation. Yeah, not necessarily that it brought in corruption, but there were a lot of objection and complaint, even from our own party people, that we have our children who somehow cannot get hold of a Mukti Yoddha
Naturally,
certificate, and,
naturally.
and they cannot even compete. You see, and many activists of Bangladesh Chhatra League also had this feeling. And at the very beginning, we took the position that no, we will actually side with the quota protesters. And in fact, at that time, those who are a bit, I would say, strict in terms of our party's own discipline and ideological standing, were complaining that no, we should not allow our activists to actually align themselves with the pro-quota protesters, because we are firmly against it. But then again, at the very beginning, we were savvy enough to understand that this was a public sentiment. This was, it was a popular demand. So our own people, our own activists were actually aligned with them. But things got out of control when violence erupted. And when in any war, in any violence, truth is the first victim. And even till today, truth remains the first victim and the only victim in this whole saga.
I do agree with you. I'm coming from India, where quota, we also have huge job quotas, and not only job, I mean quotas even in education.
Scheduled caste, yeah.
Yeah, so we have a very, very strong quota system, and since I'm not into quota, so also there is there are arguments, strong arguments on either side. It is a huge source of politics. This is a real politics. But I don't, now back to 2025, I don't think that quota is any more relevant while we are discussing Bangladesh politics, because after
Right.
August 5, no one discussed about quota.
No one discussed about quota. Yes.
And even today, some people are asking for
so there you see,
there
you see, it was just used. It was just used to bring about the chaos that we see today. It was
no, that's also okay.
Even
if I assume that it was so, it was a political ploy, then that is also okay. Your opposition will always look for opportunities, right?
Sure.
But, and that takes me to the question. Insofar as the Army League leadership is concerned, right from those violent days of July, you were talking about the third force, Tritiyo Shakti, if I remember it correctly. And the huge aspersions, it all began in June 2023, when the Prime Minister spoke about this St. Martin issue. That if she gives St. Martin, then she can rule. She re-emphasized it in many more words when she spoke about a white man coming with an offer. That was in May 2024, only a few just weeks ahead of the whole trouble. In between, Russia officially issued statement saying that some Arab Spring kind of event can take place. And after August 5, if I'm not wrong, on August 19, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, so he said, there is a strong possibility that this has been a regime change operation by the US agencies.
Yes.
Now, all that is correct. And very recently, after the interim government of Dr. Yunus sort of granted or wanted to grant, I don't know, the information is not very clear, the corridor to Myanmar, and they imposed some travel restrictions to St. Martin. It is now out of bounds of common tourists. So that has brought back the whole episode, whole discussion into context. And very recently, July 2nd or so, Somokal published an interview of Farhad Majar, where he took reference of the Jeffrey Sachs and about the regime change operation by the US. Now, all that is correct. I'm not giving any value judgment whether that has happened or not. I'm clear about one thing, that yes, in the protests, it was a popular participation. No denying about it.
At some stage, yes, absolutely, yes.
Yes,
We've
at the later stage,
that. We've also said
after
that.
the deaths, particularly after that Abu Sayyid died, it created huge emotion to people, and when people died, so many people.
At some stage, things got under control. At some stage, things got under control. The capital city was brought into some kind of discipline, even after Abu Said's death. So, and as things were getting quieter after the army was deployed, then the second line of the second strategy was brought in. Using the very institutions which were meant to bring peace. I don't want to go into the micro details of them, but we've seen how the protest leaders were not arrested, but detained, and then publicly displayed, and then let out again, and to stoke more anger and anger amongst the protesting public. So a lot were actually planned. I mean, the whole package was a very well crafted regime change operation.
So, and I mean, whether it was a regime change or not, Dr. Yunus said it, quote unquote, meticulously designed.
Correct. Okay. And there is no, I mean, in fact, in his own word, it was meticulously designed and implemented, and then he was successful in overthrowing the government.
Right. So this part is, I mean, someone was in opposition and he planned it very well. Well, we know it.
He was not even in opposition. He was not even. So you see, ruling government always thinks of the opposition as the political competitor and monitors and guides them only. Now, this is a third element that has been brought in and did what they were able to do. And perhaps, in terms of monitoring, in terms of scenario planning, this was missing. Scenario planning, that this could also come from somewhere, a third element. And perhaps those who were meant to do this scenario plannings did not do it intentionally, or were possible active participants in the scenario that was created.
I mean, I'm sorry to say, Nowfel, that this is a very naive argument when you are in government.
Yeah, absolutely. But then this is also a real.
You have access to information, and as I said, that the Russians, particularly, they said it in the open. When someone said it in the open, I assume you got 10x more classified information. That is how it happens in the
That's
government.
what I would also assume. Although I'm not privy to the decision making in the security establishment, but I'm sure it was somewhere there. Somewhere there.
So what did the government or the party do? It is not some armchair government. It is Bangladesh's most organized political party, most entrenched.
Correct.
What did they do? Did they go out, meet the protesters, meet the victims' families, seek apologies? I mean, some very basic PR activities. Did you at all? My question is, and that is a wrap-up question, did you at all take those alerts very seriously? And did you start thinking that how we should move from the government, from the party, or everyone just poo-pooed it?
I would say that there was no centralized effort into this PR repairing. There was no centralized effort. So you see, when you have a party so entrenched, and yet the leadership is, of a generation who probably cannot connect with the generation which is protesting, understanding the expectation of that particular generation is the key here. And perhaps that is what was missing. And in terms of reaching out to the victims, I myself actually had gone without any, of course, clear instruction from anywhere higher up. But we had tried, but by that time, a lot was gone.
I think you went to
So
Mugdho's family. I read the
Mugdho's
report.
family and heard their stories, etc. But you are right. When you have a huge political party, then disciplining it and also keeping it as an organized force becomes a bit of a challenge. But at the same time, what I would like to tell you here is that at some stage, Awami League leadership, the political leadership, felt that bringing the country into some kind of a civil war-like situation, which Awami League could have possibly done, would be counterproductive. It would lead to far more bloodshed. Now, in our estimate, until the 5th, from what we had seen, around 500 people had died. Later, it went up to 800. Even the official current government data is 800 something, although rhetorically they say hajar death, right? But the last government is 800 something. So the conscious, it was probably a politically not right decision, but the conscious decision or the moral decision that we had taken was that we'll cease to be in power in the manner in which we did and let the other overwhelming force of the state, the army, take over and perhaps mediate between the warring factions and bring about some kind of stability and discipline. Whether that was the right decision to take is another question. The point is, Awami League felt that the blood bath that was going on, the stain that we had on us, should not be expanded, should not be allowed to be, we shouldn't allow our party to be tainted more, or its leadership. And perhaps that's the reason why certain strategic decisions were taken. For example, taking all the party activists out of the street and into their homes and leaving the streets completely open for the other side to take over.
I think you cancelled your programs even on 2nd and 3rd.
Several times. Correct. So, in politics, there is a saying that michiler bodole michil, right? So when you have a political position, you have a counter-political position. But for some reason, whether it is a strategic or whether it was, I don't know, based on what kind of information, or whether the institutions which were guiding us at that time, the security establishment, asked our leadership to not hold more possession leading to further violence, I don't know. I can't comment on that. But cancelling those possessions probably had led to the disintegration that we had seen that had happened so fast. Ultimately, politics in the subcontinent, in the region, is of course a competition of muscle and power and strength. It is not just efficacy of your policies. It is not just the nuances of crafted speeches. It is not just that. It is essentially, ultimately, also a power game, right? And in nascent democracies like Bangladesh, I mean, although we are there for 53 years, democratic government we claimed many times that we had, but the culture was not so entrenched. The culture was still take it or leave it. The culture was still that it's my way or highway, right? And when you're dealing with an opposition which wanted to eliminate you completely, how can you sit on the same table with them and actually come to some kind of a consensus with them? You see, you have to understand that the political force that we were dealing with, had tried to kill the entire leadership of Awami League on the 21st of August by hiring terrorists who threw grenades to kill Sheikh Hasina and the entire party leadership. Now, when you have that kind of a situation, and during that regime, there was state-sponsored terrorism. Bangladesh was at that time breeding ground of terrorist elements during the time of 2001 and 6. Now, if you just allow me to complete this in this way, that when you have that kind of a government in place, led by a political force which wants to eliminate you completely through the terrorists that they had been harboring inside the country, how can you really have a consensus-driven, peaceful political discourse in the country? That is a question that we have to see how it will play out in the long run. But the reality is, you've seen how Bangladesh was being used as a transit point for weapons to go to rebels in Indian Northeast, how Bangladesh was being used as a terror exporting land. We had JMB, Ansar Bangladesh, so many terror outfits which were actually actively sponsored by the state.
Right. I have to stop you because of paucity of time. And I would invite you to be here to discuss the next part of the terrorism and etc. Yes, Bangladesh is very important. We must discuss Bangladesh, that what is going to happen. But let me end this discussion with a simple observation. I also agree with Nowfel that the government, or the Hasina government, wanted to did not avoid the brinkmanship. They could have just mobilized their own people and got into the kind of violence, counter violence. They have tried to avoid it, but failed to stop it as well.
Further
ended up
bloodshed.
Going nowhere. Ended up they had to leave with a huge blame, but they failed to stop the death toll. Unfortunately, they had to leave the power. They had to go, and it in a very unnatural circumstances, where it has the worst bloodshed in the history of Bangladesh, independent Bangladesh. The last time we saw such bloodshed, and that was of much greater significance, was in liberation struggle. So, and in barely 21 days, he mentioned about 500 deaths that they estimated, which is huge, later on, the interim government listed out 834 deaths, and then other numbers are coming in, but let us settle at 834 deaths, which are gazetted. So thank you so much. And I wish you join me into the discussion next time. We will talk more about the way forward for Bangladesh, where its politics is going. You were saying that it has a it is somewhat like a terror exporting nation. It was on the verge of it a decade more, and a half ago, when it was in the FATF grey list. So we will discuss about those issues, the geopolitical context, in our next podcast, whenever you will find time. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Dada. Thank you.